Welcome everyone to the final Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire Masterclass webinar of 2023. I want to say a little hello from myself first of all. You might have seen me in the last couple of webinars. I've just joined the team at Heart Sports Partnership and I work with Will and we're leading the Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire movement. But I thought it might be helpful to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my previous work and why I'm so interested in this. So before moving here, I worked with the wonderful team at HCPA, and that's Hearts Care Providers Association. And for those that don't know, they provide all sorts of support for any care providers in Hertfordshire. And in my team, we were the prevention and enablement team. So I delivered education, training on how to reduce your risk of falls and frailty. And I really was passionate about delivering chair-based exercises and helping people to take that into their own place of work and teach others chair-based exercises. Before that, I worked for the wonderful Hearts Independent Living Services, now known as the Health and Independent Living Support. And I was part of the active ageing team for a couple of years. And we have Tanya on the call as well, who's part of the active ageing team. The active ageing team is a fantastic service. They work within people's own homes, doing one-to-one support with physical activity. So it's building confidence, strength and balance. And you'll see that all links to reducing our risk of dementia, falls and frailty. So that's a little bit about my background. And those roles have given me passion for helping people, passion for enablement. And we'll touch on that term as we go through the webinar. But that's a little bit about me. So in terms of the webinar today, everyone is muted and cameras are off, so don't worry, I can't see you. It's the webinar function on Zoom, so you should just be able to see myself and Will when he is with us. It will not last any more than 90 minutes, but for best viewing experience, please click on the speaker view. So this should be at the top right of your screen. Please, we welcome all comments and networking through the chat function. We've already had lots of people say who they are and where they're from, so thank you, keep that coming in. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. It's a bit easier for us to keep track of that than questions in the chat. So if you can remember to put your questions in the Q&A box, please do. And we'll try and answer those questions in the webinar. And if we're not able to, then we'll get back to you with the information. This webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our website and distributed to those who have signed up for the event. And you can see previous recordings as well on our website. So last week we had the webinar about different funding opportunities. So if anyone is inspired to do a project to try and help people live longer better, definitely worth the watch because we can help you in that regard. We also did a webinar about the Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire Champions programme, and I'll touch on that again later, but there is that webinar to watch again if you'd like to. Okay, so the order of today, we're going to look at falls and frailty and what are the risk factors for dementia, falls and frailty. They're all interlinked. What is frailty itself and how can we reduce the risk? We know what the risks are. What actions do we need to take? And then we're going to have Mia Gray talk to us about the Brainability Programme and what is dementia. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk to you about the causes, and there are interrelated causes of the problems that occur as people are living longer. Traditionally, we might always put this down to aging. This just happens as we age. But in fact, we need to put more, we need to think more about these other interrelated causes. So the first of which being loss of fitness. It's clear that brain fitness is reduced by inactivity, just like physical activity. So if we are reducing our physical activity, we may reduce our muscle strength, our balance, our ability to do day-to-day tasks. If we reduce that physical activity, we can also reduce our brain fitness. And that links to being stimulated and how that can support us to reduce the risk. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll tell you about reducing the risk later on. Secondly is disease. So much of disease is preventable. And if we're thinking about dementia in particular, this could be disease including damage to one part of the brain as a result of a stroke, or perhaps generalized changes to the brain from the effects of Alzheimer's disease or disease of the cardiovascular system. And that cardiovascular system is really important because it impairs the oxygen supply to the brain. Just like our heart and lungs and our body needs oxygen to function, so does the brain. So we need to keep our cardiovascular health to reduce our risk of dementia. And thirdly, there's social and environmental causes of these problems. Social causes, we're thinking around pessimistic or negative beliefs about aging. Could be that we don't believe in ourselves as we age, or maybe the expectations we put on others as they age. Environmental problems could be, for too many people, deprivation or housing problems. So those other three interrelated causes have a much bigger impact as people are living longer. Not aging alone. There's further risk factors, and this is not an exhaustive list, but a few of the key ones that I want to bring to our attention is reduced activity. That's physical, social, and emotional activity. If we reduce any of that, then we're going to be reducing the health of the brain. We're going to be reducing stimulation. We could be reducing our muscle strength and our balance. And all of that is going to lead to increased risk of falls. It contributes to frailty, and it's going to put us at higher risk of developing dementia. So what is frailty, first of all? So frailty, we can often use it as a descriptive word, but in fact, it's a long-term health condition. It's a clinical condition. It requires diagnosis. So these are the indicators of frailty, and this comes from the British Geriatric Society Fit for Frailty toolkit. The first indicator of frailty is falls. So if someone's having recurrent falls, their legs are giving way, that is a sign that someone's developing frailty. And the second being immobility. So someone's change in mobility, perhaps they require more support of a walking aid than previously. Thirdly is delirium. And delirium is an acute confusion. It's not your day-to-day confusion. It's out of character, that hyper state of confusion. Fourth is new or worsening incontinence, and fifth is susceptibility to the side effects of medication. So frailer older adults are going to have a much bigger impact from medication that they take and those side effects that we'll look into a little bit later on. So it's really important that if you notice any of these things, that it's waving that red flag for frailty, and we need to try and get a diagnosis and speak to a clinician. We also have characteristics. So there's 5 key characteristics, and you'll see these linked to those risk factors we spoke about earlier. So unintentional weight loss, reduced muscle strength, reduced gait speed. A gait speed is our walking speed, self-reported exhaustion, and low energy expenditure. So if people are losing weight and reducing their muscle strength, they might not be doing as much, so lower physical activity. All of that is going to increase someone's risk of having a fall. It's going to reduce stimulation and could increase risk of dementia. Generally, if people have 3 or more of these characteristics, they're said to have a level of frailty. Okay. So the definition of frailty from the British Geriatric Society is that it's a clinically recognised state of increased vulnerability. And how we see that day to day is shown quite nicely in this graph. So our green line is a fit older adult. Good morning, Muir.
Good morning.
The green line is a fit older adult. So they are in a level of independence, and they may have a minor illness. Say, for example, a UTI is going to have a little dip in their function. It's going to take them a few days to recover. We might not feel up to what we usually are, but we bounce back and we carry on. The orange line is a frailer older adult. So with frailty, people might rely more on others, so that their level of dependence is already slightly lower. That same minor illness is going to have a greater impact on them, and they're going to go to new levels of dependence on others. And you'll see it takes a lot longer for that person to recover, and they don't quite bounce back to where they were before. So they've reduced their resilience because they're more vulnerable. But frailty varies in severity, and we can't just label someone as being frail or not being frail. It's just that they have frailty, and that degree of frailty can vary over time. It can be made better and it can get worse. And it's really key to remember frailty is not an inevitable part of aging. So you might think, you might be able to think of someone you know who's fairly young and perhaps are on this higher end of the frailty scale. Or maybe you know someone who's older and actually they're on the lower end of this scale. So if we look at the details of this scale, as we're going through, you can see individuals become more reliant on others for areas of daily living, such as transport or finance. So that is the changes that we're seeing. And as I say, this is not an inevitable part of aging. We are all developing a level of frailty, but old age doesn't mean most frail. So from the age of 50, everyone needs to take action. It's a whole population approach. We need to try and reduce our risk and put things into place so that we can stay at the lower end of this scale. Now, to briefly touch on falls, we have the fall cycle. And we know that falls have a massive impact on people's lives. So if someone has a fall, they might then be very fearful of falling again. And that fear could lead them not to want to do much. They might limit their activity. And from limiting the activity, like I've mentioned already, we're reducing a lot of other areas. We're reducing muscle strength, reducing balance and stimulation as well. And all of that is going to increase our risk of falling again. And that increased risk is leading to the vicious cycle of falling. So we need to try and break that fall cycle. And how do we do that? We do that through activity. So I'm really pleased that Muir's with us today, because he's going to talk to us about the different types of activity that we're aiming for and their importance to help try and reduce our risk of dementia, falls and frailty. So if it's all right with you, Muir, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies for being late. I had computer problems. Fortunately, I'm very skilled at dealing with computer problems. I just switched the bloody thing off and put it back on again. And
someone I used to work with used to say, you can't beat the 3-pin reset, aka unplug it from the wall and plug it back in again.
Yeah. Okay, let me just, so very nice to be with you. And let me just put up some images for discussion. So a very good presentation from Charlotte, and I'll just share the screen if I may. Can you give me permission to share the screen, Charlotte?
Of course, sorry. Yes. Should be working now, sorry.
That's okay. Okay. So, Charlotte's spoken very clearly about the 4 processes that affect us as we live longer: aging, loss of fitness, disease, and social processes, which may be fundamental, like deprivation and housing problems, but are often more easy to influence, like negative thinking and pessimism, ageism. So the recipe for action is to understand aging. We can't do anything about it, but we do say sometimes we've discovered the elixir of life, and it's called knowledge, the elixir of healthier life. How do we help people live longer, better? And we need to help people regain fitness. And we're banning the word physical ability or physical fitness because it's always physical, cognitive, and emotional. And that, of course, links with the need to prevent and tackle disease. And every long-term condition you acquire, and I've got 3 years or more, you need to become even more active because there's accelerated loss of fitness. So these two things are linked. And we're working with Hertfordshire to plan the introduction of activity prescriptions linked to every drug prescription. But that requires us to think positive and take action. So the aim is to enable people to increase activity, physical, cognitive, and emotional. And our aim, the outcome of that will be firstly to compress the period of life where we're heavily dependent on others. People don't want to live to 118 or 142, which is sometimes promised by the people working in laboratories to make an elixir of life. They want to live longer, better. And the second outcome that this results in is to help people feel better this year, to prevent or delay dementia, disability, and frailty, as well as reducing the risk of falls. And it'll reduce the need for health and social care. And we must start thinking now much more radically about the future and about the increase in the number of people aged over 80 in the next 10 years, which hopefully will include me, and how we can reduce the need for health and social care. And you see, by getting people to become fitter physically, cognitively, and emotionally, and Charlotte showed that very good graph that she's developed with the dipping below. That person, Charlotte, at least came above the line and went back. But some people will never get out of hospital, and that's because they've become deconditioned before admission, and there's accelerated decondition in hospital. And it just happened to a relative of mine who spent 2 weeks in hospital. But actually, the main problem is the astonishing loss of strength that's occurred in that 2-week period, called the deconditioning syndrome. So we need to move from a situation in which people are frequently admitted in the last 3 years of life to a situation in which they are much less frequently and they die well at home. So you're now part of the Hertfordshire network, and I know there are sub-networks within Hertfordshire because the way the buses flow and the way the hospitals are, but this is the century of the system and the network. We need bureaucracies for the fair and open employment of staff and the purchase of X-ray machines, and they're vitally important. But this is the century of the system and the network. And the network, the job of the network is to give leadership. And the job of leadership is to change culture. Management then works within culture. So we need to think of a new language. For example, talk about enabling rather than care. We've got a learning program for older people that can deliver through GP information systems. And it'd be very good to have one primary care network. And there may be some people here from health centres and primary care networks, even if we start off somewhere, to start delivering learning and activity prescriptions. We've got it signed off by NHS Digital. We're just looking for a partner organisation. And rather than cover the whole of Hertfordshire to start with, we'd be very pleased to work with one primary care network or one health centre. And then there's people like yourselves and the champions and the learning programme. It's only 12 modules, very short, about what happens to us as we live longer. For example, we need to create a new language to move from care to enabling. We need to give people a sense of mission and purpose. And the Hertfordshire Wildlife Trust or the Woodland Trust. How do we get all the older people in care homes raising money to improve the environment and combat climate change and create jobs for young people? And we've got virtual reality that would allow them to visit all the sites of the Woodland Trust in Hertfordshire or the Hertfordshire Wildlife Trust. So starting to think of purpose, giving purpose to us, those of us who are in our 70s, 80s and 90s. And here's the learning program. And my estimate is about 500 people in Hertfordshire. It would include some GPs, but it would be even more important, practice nurses, pharmacy staff, care staff, volunteers for Age UK, Hertfordshire. We need to think in a different way. And I show this to medical colleagues that, when I look at people, I sometimes see their skull like this telephone box at the end of the road. But really, this is what we want to do. We're going to rewire your brains so you think in a different way. So great to get the Champions program up and running. Will's providing really great leadership, and Charlotte's been a wonderful person to join the program. And we need to think of live longer, better in Hertfordshire. Enough from me, Charlotte. Back to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Moore. I always love hearing you talk because you just say it so eloquently. So thank you. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about the Brainability Campaign? Sure. Okay, so when should I start thinking about increasing my brain ability?
Well, at the moment, you can probably, as you're in a new job, you're getting quite a bit of challenge. I'm sure Will is challenging in the most appropriate way. So new jobs, but actually we find that even people who become chief executives, they've done it before. So I think we need to be careful up to the age of about 55. But retirement, I think, is a significant, I don't like the word retirement. We're banning it. We're calling it renaissance. But I think from 50 on, we really need to start thinking about the fact that it's not only physical fitness that declines, it's cognitive fitness that declines. And as I say, there are things, certainly Sudoku and crosswords are very good, but it does seem that challenge is the most important thing.
Yeah, because that links nicely actually to talking about the brain and neuroplasticity, which it requires challenge and stimulation.
Yeah, you keep going, Charlotte. You've got, yes. Well, this you made this. Charlotte's developed this very good present. You keep going, Charlotte, and I'll come in at the end to talk.
This is your genius, Muir. I don't want anyone watching to think this is my genius. This is Muir's genius. So we want to think about, I really like the pictures you show of the electric box down the end of the road, because our brain has all those connections. They are comparable to a computer. And as you have found through developing your book, there's strong evidence that those new circuits can be formed at any age, so long as the brain cells.
Very important, Charlotte, also. Every doctor educated before the year 2000, people like me, were taught that the brain could not change in any way after 20. All that happened was death of brain cells. This is a man called Professor Cahal, got the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1906 for describing the neurons in the brain. But we were all just taught, well, after 20, there's no point in doing anything. But the science has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, this concept of neuroplasticity.
Yeah, and you go into more detail about neuroplasticity and the concepts and changes that can happen in the brain in your Brainability podcasts. Do you fancy telling us a little bit about them?
Yeah, I think what we've done is we've started and it's really getting serious from the 1st of January on. So the first podcast was explaining normal aging. And dementia is not accelerated normal aging. It's a distinct condition caused by Alzheimer's disease, but also by other problems, notably interruption of the blood supply to the brain, just like brings a heart attack, can also cause either stroke or dementia. And the second, we're starting to define in more detail so people understand that there's a difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, the next three months, January, February, and March, we'll be covering the 3 topics, which would be keep your brain tissue healthy, keep the blood flowing well and the oxygen flowing well, and then challenge your mind and brain by doing even more for other people. So and we'll be very happy for all the people here to receive the briefing and as a little podcast and a presentation, and pass it on to your parents and grandparents. So let's do something in Hertfordshire. Have a Brainability Campaign, and I've also started a program to get for a letter to Santa Claus that called No More Wine and Chockies. Why don't we start giving people, ask your parents should be given a new pair of trainers, or some Pilates lessons, or some dance lessons. So getting this idea that we would get people much more active, and Christmas is a time for opportunity to do that. So that's the next 3 months. And then I think everybody needs to be thinking, everyone over 55 needs to have a plan for well-being, because people age 60, the expectation of life is 30 years. It's a hell of a long time, and people have no model in their mind about how to live those 30 years. But they certainly want to avoid, people aren't so scared of cancer anymore. It's dementia, frailty, and the need for social care. That's what people want to avoid.
Definitely, and that's why I think it's so important that we'll be hosting or hosting a link to the podcasts on the Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire website, and it will be promoted with our newsletters as well. But I think it's so important that everyone hears about it, everyone learns about it, because knowledge is power. But equally, we need that cultural revolution, that mindset shift, a new way of thinking about what's happening to us, and how we can increase that brain ability, whatever our age. I think it's really important that it's a whole Hertfordshire approach, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And it's really good, the people you've got today gather together. This is the group that can create healthy longevity in Hertfordshire. For yourselves, your parents and your grandparents. That
idea, the concept of celebrating longevity, I think is one that's key to bring with us as we change the mindset. So thank you. So thinking about the brain, those processes, the normal biological process of aging is not dementia, and they're completely separate. But it is important for us to touch on what the indications of dementia are. So before I tell you the actions we can take to reduce, let's look at the changes that can indicate dementia. So there's research developing, and it's showing that failures for self-care, for example, being able to get washed, is going to be an indication of dementia. Failure to look after someone's own home, maybe they're leaving the gas on, problems with driving or problems with money, that is a sign of the condition we call dementia.
And that's not just minor memory slips. Me forgetting Will Slemming's name, for example, or the name of somebody that I met 2 days ago, or your mum forgetting a book she read 30 years ago that had a huge influence on her, but she just can't remember. These are just filing problems. They are not signs of dementia. And sometimes your parents and grandparents will be worried about this, But it's only when you get serious problems like this, you should start thinking about dementia.
Yeah, I like that because the filing problems in the brain. I like to think of my brain being a plate that can only hold so much.
Yes.
I've been forgetting some things, and with a new job, that plate is full, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay,
indeed.
so the scientific evidence is really strong to show that there are 3 methods for reducing the risk of dementia. And this is what your book goes into. So first of all, we need to keep the brain tissue healthy. And we do that by sleeping well, reducing stress, and being physically active, because all of those are going to directly stimulate the brain cells. We need to make sure we keep the blood and oxygen supply optimal, just like we would to reduce risk of heart disease. That's also going to affect our brain health. As I said, that blood and oxygen supply is vital. And thirdly, we need to stimulate the brain. So learning new skills, adding that challenge that you mentioned, Muir, and purpose is key, particularly as the new age of Renaissance. And we have those 30 years. So I'll go into a little bit more about planning in a moment, because that is what's going to support the concept of neuroplasticity. So now we're going to talk about other ways to reduce risk, but chip in, Muir, with anything you want to add, because everything you add is...
Keep going. You're doing well.
Okay, so the British Geriatric Society, they've published some actions to help manage frailty, but we know this is going to help reduce risk overall. So a comprehensive geriatric assessment should be completed. And what that means is we need to consider everything. Don't have tunnel vision. Look at all aspects of life. What are people doing? Think clinical and holistic, but dealing with clinical first of all. We need to identify medical illnesses and make sure that referrals to specialists are put in place, because frailty itself, as I said, is a health condition. We need specialists on board to help us manage frailty. And when we spoke about the frailty characteristics, that susceptibility to side effects of medication is really important to be aware of. So medication reviews should be conducted. HCPA have a fantastic medication resource. So it's a list of some of the common medications and their impacts, their increased risk of falls. So you can have a look through this and see what medications you're taking or your loved ones, those that you support, are taking. And if you are noticing these side effects, then that is something that you can flag to a clinician. And that is going to, in turn, help us reduce risk. This is where we think holistically, and that planning and purpose is absolutely key here. So the person who's caught this best is Camilla Cavendish, and her book's called Extra Time. I've just ordered it through the Hertfordshire Library app. I wasn't going to do this, but I will shout out the Hertfordshire Library app, because literally from your phone, you can order whatever book they have in Hertfordshire to your local library. It sounds silly, but it's a great service. So I've ordered Extra Time, and she has a whole chapter on Ikigai, which is Japanese for life purpose. And also there's a book called What Retirees Want, and that speaks about the problems that retirees or renaissancees face when they enter their period of retirement. As we say, it's 30 years. We need to plan and have purpose within those 30 years. And sometimes this is something that catches people by surprise. They haven't maybe thought about it. And so that's where goal setting comes into play. Potentially the best approach is to help the person identify their goals or identify their objectives and help them to reach that. It can be particularly helpful if you're working with a group, because then we can have a bit of competition. You were mentioning care homes. You're maybe raising money for the local Hertfordshire Wildlife Trust. That group sense of purpose is going to give people a reason to get up in the morning. And if we're thinking holistically, we're thinking big picture. So we need to consider multiple risk factors. And if you're a care provider, HCPA have a multifactorial risk assessment for falls. And they have a template they'd be happy to share with you. And it considers everything. It's gold standard, all CQC guidance, all NHS guidance, because we need to consider lots and lots of different factors, not just consider them, but act upon them. That's the key. What's really interesting, and I wanted to include in this, is our blue zones. So blue zones are regions of the world where there's a higher than usual number of people living to 90 or 100. So there's been a lot of research done on these different blue zones by scientists over the years, and they found 4 key themes across the different blue zones that they believe is the key to this longevity. So first of all, they move regularly with daily bursts of energy throughout the day, reducing that sedentary behaviour, upping that activity. Secondly, living with purpose. They have a reason to get up every day. Thirdly, the social support they're receiving from friends and family is allowing them to move through their problems that they're facing more smoothly. And I think that harks back directly to the concept of changing care to enablement, a supportive culture. And fourth is a culture of healthy lifestyle. Nothing else is known apart from healthy choices and good diet. Anything you wanted to add about the blue zones, Neil? Because I remember hearing about this from you first of all. I'm sorry, Neil, you're on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you.
No, I think there's good lessons from the blue zone. They're atypical, so it may be hard if you're living in Hemel Hempstead to imagine you're living in Okinawa, but there's always things to learn, and we can see these 4 lessons. And the right outlook is increasingly recognised, as you saw from that article from the Journal of the American Medical Association, which you would think would be publishing articles on, DNA and RNA and such things, but positivity and challenge. So lots to learn.
I thought it'd be interesting to share this piece of research as well. This was conducted during the pandemic by the Mental Health Foundation. And this outlines different positive coping strategies for the whole population of the UK, and the orange bits are for those over the age of 70. And what's really up there is going outside for a walk. And that aligns perfectly more with Live Longer Better's national campaign in 2023 about getting out for brisk walks. We know that everyone, we know that this is going to have such a big impact on our physical and emotional well-being. Close runner-up is contact with family, and you also see on there is contact with friends. So that social and emotional activity is absolutely vital, and being able to visit green spaces. I think they call it green architecture, and how can we embed that in our day-to-day lives and into our facilities.
The one that's missing there, of course, Charlotte, which I think they would put in now, would be this sense of purpose. So doing something for others, I think I would put on there. Now, contacting family might be doing something for others, but lots of people have no family, and even contacting family, I think people should have. We should encourage and enable people to do something for the future, for their children and grandchildren, and of course the environment is. People understand this is a big issue now, and we can all make a small contribution to that.
Absolutely. You're right. A sense of purpose, doing something for others should be on that list. Okay, so activity is the key to try and reduce our risk of dementia, falls and frailty. And it's not just physical activity. Traditionally, evidence has shown the vast benefits of physical activity, so let's not undermine that. But we want to also think about the power of social and cognitive activity too. But first of all, thinking about physical activity, evidence is leaning to show that strength and balance is the most effective at reducing risk of falls. And strength and balance exercises, they are ones completed standing up. But chair-based seated exercises, they're great to improve confidence, to improve movement, particularly useful for those who aren't able to stand up. It could even be a stepping stone to then helping individuals to be able to stand and complete standing strength and balance. The strength part is vital. So from the age of 40, adults lose 8% of their muscle mass per decade, and low muscle mass is significantly associated with that loss of ability to perform activities of daily living. So getting dressed, going to the toilet, low muscle mass as well is key for us to try and combat through those strength and balance exercises. It's particularly important as we age. So for those in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we should be doing more as we age, not less. And I think it's really important to remember it's never too late. And there was this good research study I found where a group of nursing residents aged 90 plus did 12 weeks of strength and balance, and in those 12 weeks they doubled their leg strength. It's not too late, and we can make differences. I think something that stuck with me from one of the talks I've attended with you previously is your press ups. And your next birthday, you're going to add another 10 press ups to your morning routine. Is that right?
Another one.
Another one.
Yeah. I do.
I need to start.
I do. I try to do 80 press ups. I'm 78, but you find when you're doing exercise, you tend to count 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. So yeah. You've always got to cope a little bit with counting problems when you're doing exercise.
Mm-hmm. You've added a little buffer there.
Yes.
Perfect. Fun fact for you is that not being able to stand on one leg for 10 seconds is a strong predictor of falls, but also it's associated with a 3-fold increased incidence of hip fracture. So we know falls, and particularly hip fractures, can be a turning point in someone's life. So a great thing to encourage is having a 2-minute timer on a toothbrush as a reminder to practice standing on one leg whilst you're brushing your teeth. So you can add that to the Christmas list too, as well as the trainers and the Pilates classes.
Yes, my wife is used to the fact that sometimes I'm introduced, and the woman who's introducing says, I think of you agree when I'm getting ready for bed, but it's actually brushing their teeth. That's what people think, because I'm a great promoter of the 2-minute on one leg.
Yeah, brilliant. I think it's a helpful one because you've got the sink there as well, so you can steady yourself if you need to.
Yeah.
You actually introduced me, Muir, to the Active 10 app, which is a fantastic NHS app. There's a bit more detail on the following slide, but it's free to download and it helps you track walking. Social activity then. So we know social engagement supports stimulation and reduces isolation. So it's really important for groups to be encouraged to have that common purpose, strengthening that social engagement. Digital inclusion as well goes a long way to help people stay connected, and I know that there's projects going on in the libraries in Hertfordshire for digital inclusion, and in rural communities as well. They are setting up hubs within village halls, so if anyone has particular interest in that, then I can put you in touch with CDA, the team that is running those digital inclusion hubs. And cognitive activity, this is where the challenge comes in. Learning something new. As we've discussed, neuroplasticity can occur at any age, and we need to try and change the assumption that as people live longer, they need less stimulation, or they're less capable of responding to stimulation. So you could get someone access to an open university course. You could send them my way to the Champions course, which is a fantastic opportunity that's been developed with Muir. And thinking more locally, now I want to be very clear here, this is not exhaustive. There is endless support locally, so please put in the chat now if you think actually we do something for physical, social, emotional, cognitive activity. We need to know about it all, and my job and my mission is to try and shout about everything we do, connect us all, because we're a big network. But we've got the Brainability podcasts, and Mia's spoken to us about the themes. They're going to be linked on the Hertfordshire website. Our own website and our own services, for example, our funding service. So if you have a project in mind, or you want a little bit of money to help older adults live longer better, then come to us, because we can help you out with that. And we have our activity finder, the Moving More activity finder, and that is going to help us find local opportunities, basically. And if you are offering an opportunity, please make sure you're utilizing that tool. It's free to use, and it's incredibly helpful for people to find what's local to them. We've got the Dementia Support Finder on the Alzheimer's website, and Stevenage Football Club Foundation run free strength and balance classes in every locality of Hertfordshire. So when we send out these slides, these are all hyperlinked, and it can take you to see which class is local to you. And during lockdown, they made activity packs as well. So I wanted to include that because it's got instructions for those strength and balance exercises if you wanted to do them within your own home. We've got Hearts Independent Living Service, Active Aging, and that free one-to-one support within people's own homes. Our healthy hubs, they're in every locality or local authority, and it's that one-stop shop. Health walks are fantastic county-wide. The Saracens love to dance. They've got love to balance sessions as well. If anyone's interested in these, just get in touch with me, and I'll get you in touch with the right person. And our Heartswise Dementia Service, and these are dementia hubs across the county for people living with dementia and their carers to attend a support group.
If you don't mind, Charlotte, I'm just going to butt in.
Yeah.
Only because, well, first of all, we're having a quick scan through the attendee list, and there's so many great people here from different areas of work in Hertfordshire that deserve a shout out. And apologies, I'm only going to do a couple, but I know there's loads in here. First of all, Tom Watkins from Communities First has put a link in the chat already. Has a team of digital champion volunteers who go out spreading who go out and about spreading digital skills and confidence in the districts of Hertsmere and St Albans. So if you're interested in that,
brilliant.
We've got Rebecca Hadley on the webinar, who's a research fellow at UH, who's done loads of work on dementia and physical activity. So Becky, if you're listening, please feel free to pop any links in the chat for people to learn a bit more about the work you've been doing, and we can include those as well in the email out after this. Tom Rankin's in the room, who we've been doing loads of work with on the Falls Pathways. So he works for HCC. He's a project officer within Adult Care Services, and been doing loads of work around evidence-based classes and the impact and how that can fit into the more statutory pathways, which has been great working alongside someone like that. And again, all this kind of information can be found online if you want to find out more. Also a real big shout out to John Molyneux in the room. We've been doing loads of work with John and his Molly Fit work throughout COVID and since. He's a sports therapist. He's won awards for his sports therapy work that he does in and around Hertfordshire. He goes out to libraries free of charge, to the GP surgeries or to the pharmacies to offer free advice for older adults and how they can be moving more and moving better. And some of the stories he comes out with about kind of 2 weeks later, it's kind of someone that was on a Zimmer frame is now kind of skipping down the road. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but kind of moving without the frames, unassisted, just from changing a slight movement or doing something slightly different in their day. John's got a couple of great books, and apologies, John, if I say this wrong, but we'll include the links. I believe, at least I know the Who Says Age Should Slow You Down, I think, is in Hertfordshire libraries as well, which can be accessed through the libraries. Also, A Better You in Later Life is a fantastic book that John's written, both about the importance of active aging and some practical examples of what you can be doing. So yeah, I'll stop there because I could go on forever. But if anyone else has some contributions that they'd like everyone to hear about, please do put it in the chat, as we're drawing to a close in this webinar anyway, and we can include it in the mail out, or we can add the slide before we mail out so that everyone else knows.
Yeah, and just to add as well, we're really fortunate to have John join the Champions programme. So if anyone wants to learn with John and learn from John, then that's the perfect law into the Champions programme. Anything you wanted to add at this stage, Muir?
I think you're doing great work in Hertfordshire, and this has been a very important meeting to bring these things together. So I'm very impressed with what's going on. You're doing great. Thank you.
And so a new piece of work that we're doing is the Champions programme that we've alluded to a few times this morning. Please encourage staff and volunteers to come and join us on that training. It's a fantastic opportunity to access funded training package, to learn about Live Longer Better values, and it's been co-created by Sir Muir Gray. So by doing it, you'll be gaining expert insights into how to promote the importance of improving physical activity, how to discuss purpose, and how to discuss aging and what is associated with that. It's not what we traditionally think, how we can bring that into conversations with the older adults we support. Also, please find a friend, explain to them the difference between dementia and normal aging. The Lancet says it's never too early, it's never too late to reduce your risk of dementia. So we can do it, and let's start now. Visit Moving More to find your local opportunities. Could be walking groups, walking sports. There's lots of low impact physical activity opportunities. And download the Active 10 app and buy some trainers for someone you support for Christmas. So as it says here, the Active 10 app records every minute of walking that you do, as you can track your steps, you can set goals, and you can work towards your achievements. So it's a nice motivating app that we have there. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Of course, we can look at the questions perhaps if there's time.
Yep, absolutely. Just quickly, so Jess Hammond has also put into the chat that the Saracens Foundation offer dance classes, DAS fitness classes, and strength and balance classes for the over 50s. If you want to find out more, you can get in touch with Jess, and she's put her email address right there. And we have also had a question. It's more of a statement, I think, or a suggestion from Mark, who has said that he thinks there's room to expand the Live Longer Better message to emphasize mental health, substance misuse, and health conditions such as obesity and diabetes, social isolation and loneliness. And I mean, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. It's absolutely spot on with the Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire ethos and mission, and we've got lots of work lined up that we can't reveal all the details of yet, but in the new year, a specific focus on multi-condition support for long-term health conditions, but also specific condition support around upskilling the workforces, and putting on some specific sessions and support for people to be able to do that. So absolutely, definitely agree with you, Mark, and it will be included a lot more going forward. And I think that's it. So I don't think there's any other questions in the chat. If anyone does have any questions following this, sorry, I'm taking a little bit here, Charlotte. But if anyone does have any questions following this, for us or from your, please do get in touch. Charlotte's got her email address there on the final slide. These slides will be circulated where we go, so hopefully by the end of the week, and the recording will be on the website as well. But equally, if anyone else, just one more So Marta Hall suggested, fantastic webinar, very informative and interesting. Are there any networking groups in Hertfordshire which we should join? This is it. Like, I mean, I don't mean this is it, but this is exactly one of the biggest outcomes for Live Longer Better, is that we want to improve the networking. All the conversation that's going on in the chat right now is exactly what we want to do. And as well as the upskill and the improvement of knowledge, we want to get people working better together. And that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest quick wins I think we can have. We're quite lucky in Hertfordshire that we've got a lot of great services. Some of them have already been mentioned and loads of them haven't. What we're terrible at in Hertfordshire is letting each other know about what we're doing, because we're all so busy and everything's happening in silos. So the more we can do that together, and the more you can be involved with our network and any other networks that we can promote as well. And the champions training is a great way of doing that as well, because Charlotte's going to be hosting a lot of optional sort of reflection sessions and opportunities for people to come together physically and virtually to talk about what you're up to, what you can offer, any ideas you might have. So please do, if you have any other suggestions, feed into us, because we can help get your message to everyone else. Equally, if you've got any ideas for specific networking sessions or opportunities going forward, please feed them into us as well, because we can help try and make that happen. Yeah, I think that's my answer. Anything else, Charlotte?
That's everything. I think we've covered it. Anything, Muir?
No, great. Keep going, Hertfordshire. We learn from you.
Go Team Hertfordshire. Thank you everyone for coming along. Big shout out to Muir. Thank you for finding the time for us. It's inspirational hearing you talk, so really appreciate that. And I'm really proud to be part of the revolution and the movement. So please keep in touch, and we'll keep making these positive impacts for everyone to live longer better. But have a fantastic Christmas and a happy New Year. And I'll see you next year.
And a New Year's revolution. It's a New Year's revolution.
A New Year's revolution. I like it. That's going on the mailing list.
Yeah.
On the newsletter. Marvelous. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you in 2023.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.